South Park Syndrome: How a Generation Misunderstood Satire and the Death of Critical Thinking. In 2006, an interviewer asked South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone if they leaned more liberal or conservative. Their response? "We hate conservatives, but we really fucking hate liberals." For many fans, this was proof that South Park was an equal opportunity offender. But for others, it became a free pass to disengage entirely from the show's deeper themes. They didn't understand that hating both sides didn't mean everything was a joke. It meant questioning power. Enter what I call South Park Syndrome, a mindset that afflicts a certain subset of people who grew up watching satire without ever grasping its lessons. They learned that everything is mockable, but never understood why some things deserved scrutiny more than others. And now, as adults, they bring that same detached irony to real-world issues, insisting that nothing matters except their right to keep laughing at it all. How South Park Syndrome works. Satire at its core is supposed to make you think. It highlights absurdity to expose deeper truths, whether it's the hypocrisy of politicians, the contradictions in American culture, or the way society treats marginalized groups. Satire, at its best, forces audiences to confront their own biases and assumptions. But that only works if the audience is willing to engage critically. For some fans, South Park and similar shows didn't serve as tools for understanding social critique. They were a masterclass in detached cynicism. Instead of asking why something was being mocked, they only took away the idea that everything should be mocked. The result? A generation of people who dismiss serious issues with, "it's all the same," "everything is stupid," or "both sides are bad." This is how we end up with people who, when faced with political corruption, systemic racism, or climate change, respond with a smug, "Well, what did you expect?" instead of considering solutions. It's also how irony became a shield for bigotry, because if everything is a joke, then nothing can really be that harmful, right? Molly Evans, a renowned political columnist, captured this dynamic perfectly when she said, "When satire is aimed at the powerless, it is not only cruel, it's vulgar." Ivan's quote highlights a crucial aspect of effective satire. It should punch up, not down. When satire targets the powerful, politicians, corporations, systemic injustices, it serves as a form of resistance. But when satire is misread to mock the vulnerable, it ceases to be satire and becomes cruelty disguised as comedy. The problem with both-sides-ism. One of South Park's defining traits is its tendency to roast everyone. The show has famously targeted liberals, conservatives, religious groups, atheists, corporations, activists, you name it. And while this approach can sometimes be brilliant, it also lends itself to a kind of lazy nihilism, the belief that nothing really matters, so why bother caring about anything at all? Instead of inspiring skepticism toward power, it often encourages a detached, everything is stupid mentality that makes it easier to dismiss real problems rather than engage with them. For example, in early seasons, South Park mocked climate change activists through the character of Al Gore, portraying him as an attention-seeking alarmist obsessed with man-bear-pig, a made-up creature meant to represent global warming. The joke wasn't just at Gore's expense, it also fueled the idea that climate change wasn't a real or urgent issue. Years later, Parker and Stone publicly admitted they got it wrong and even made a follow-up episode correcting their stance. But by then, the damage was done. The original joke had already given climate deniers an easy punchline. John Oliver, one of the most successful modern satirists, has spoken about the role of satire in political discourse. It's a great time to be doing political satire when the world is on a knife edge. Oliver's comment underscores that satire is at its most powerful when it challenges systems of power in moments of crisis. When used correctly, satire doesn't just mock, it illuminates. The problem with South Park Syndrome is that it reduces everything to a joke, making real-world issues seem unserious or unsolvable. This is the danger of both-sides-ism. When you treat every issue as equally absurd, you erase the reality that some things are worse than others. Not all political parties, movements, or social causes are equally deserving of ridicule. Not all oppression is just people being too sensitive. But South Park Syndrome thrives on pretending otherwise. when satire gets misread. The phenomenon of satire being misread isn't unique to South Park. Countless other shows and films have faced similar misinterpretations. All in the Family intended Archie Bunker to be a satire of bigotry, yet many viewers idolized him instead. Fight Club was crafted as a critique of toxic masculinity, only to be embraced by the very men it sought to warn against. The Boondocks introduced satirical characters like Uncle Ruckus to expose racism, but some audiences laughed with him rather than at him. Even Rick and Morty, a show that actively mocks its most toxic fans, ended up cultivating a fan base more obsessed with proving who's the smartest in the room than engaging with its deeper existential themes. We see this misinterpretation in modern politics too. MAGA extremists use humor as a way to push harmful ideologies under the guise of just joking. On the flip side, the ultra-liberal crowd often strips humor of its subversive power, demanding purity over critique. And somewhere in the middle, centrists, supposedly the reasonable ones, end up feeding both extremes by either trying too hard to be above it all or bending over backward to appease performative outrage. Satire is meant to ridicule power. When the punchline targets the vulnerable instead, it stops being satire and becomes cruelty disguised as comedy. This reflects a key misunderstanding. Satire is not just making fun of things. It is about critique, analysis, and exposing hypocrisy. When just asking questions becomes a way to avoid accountability. For years, I was an avid listener of the Joe Rogan Experience. Like many people, I was drawn in by his long-form conversations, his curiosity, and his ability to bring on a wide variety of guests. At first, it felt refreshing, an open forum where ideas could be explored without the rigid constraints of traditional media. But over time, I started noticing a pattern. Rogan rarely took a firm stance on anything, even when it was clear that misinformation or harmful rhetoric was at play. His signature phrase, "I'm just asking questions," became less of an invitation for critical thinking and more of a way to sidestep responsibility. This is where South Park syndrome and Rogan's brand of detached discussion intersect. When everything is framed as just a joke or just a conversation, it fosters an environment where nothing is really taken seriously. Dangerous ideas can spread under the guise of curiosity, and critical engagement gets replaced with passive consumption. The audience, much like many South Park fans, absorbs the humor and the debate, but doesn't always do the work of questioning what it all really means. The result? A culture of cynicism, where skepticism gets mistaken for intelligence, and where laughing at everything feels more comfortable than confronting hard truths. I know this because I was there. I consumed the satire, I listened to the podcasts, and I too thought I was seeing the world more clearly because of it. But the reality is, satire and free-form discussion only work as tools for understanding when you actively engage with them. If you don't, they become a smokescreen, an excuse to sit back, laugh, and feel superior while the world burns around us. The consequences of South Park syndrome. So, what happens when an entire generation is raised on satire but never learns to engage with it critically? The first and most obvious consequence is detached cynicism, where people approach serious issues with an air of superiority, dismissing anyone who genuinely cares as naive or overreacting. This mindset fosters political apathy, making it easy to believe that nothing really matters, that all sides are equally bad, and that trying to create change is pointless. When everything is framed as ridiculous or hypocritical, real activism and progress start to feel like a waste of time. At the same time, ironic bigotry stops being ironic. The alt-right, in particular, has mastered the art of using humor as a smokescreen, pushing racist, sexist, and homophobic ideologies into mainstream spaces under the guise of satire. By cloaking harmful rhetoric in sarcasm and memes, they make it easier for people to engage in bigotry without fully acknowledging it. Or worse, while convincing themselves they're simply being edgy. Finally, humor itself becomes a defense mechanism, a way to deflect from difficult conversations rather than engage with them. Instead of wrestling with uncomfortable truths, people retreat into jokes, using laughter to shield themselves from accountability. This is how South Park syndrome turns from a passive media habit into a cultural force, one that dulls our ability to recognize when something actually deserves outrage, action, or genuine reflection. I love South Park, but that's why this matters. Before anyone gets defensive, let me be clear. I love South Park. I grew up watching it, quoting it, and laughing at its sharpest critiques, and I still think Family Guy and The Simpsons have had brilliant moments of satire. This piece isn't about canceling these shows or pretending they haven't made insightful cultural commentary. Instead, this is about recognizing how we, as an audience, engage with satire. For a long time, I was someone who absorbed it all uncritically. I leaned into the cynicism, the detached irony, the both-sides-ism without questioning it. And that kind of thinking is easy. It lets you feel above it all. But what I've come to realize is that detachment is a privilege. Not everyone gets to check out and roll their eyes at everything. So, no, South Park Syndrome isn't a dig at the shows themselves. It's a call to think about how we interpret them and whether we're actually learning from them or just using them as an excuse to disengage. Recognizing South Park Syndrome isn't about giving up satire. It's about learning to engage with it critically. When we stop questioning what we're laughing at, we let those in power off the hook while patting ourselves on the back for getting the joke. But isn't that just comedy? At this point, someone might argue, it's just a TV show. People are responsible for how they interpret it. Yes and no. While it's true that Parker and Stone aren't responsible for every dumb take their audience has, media creators do shape cultural narratives. When satire is too ambiguous, it risks being co-opted by those it's meant to critique. And when fans are never encouraged to question what they're laughing at, they end up mistaking cynicism for wisdom. This isn't about policing comedy, it's about media literacy. What now? We are living in a time when political engagement is crucial. We have literal fascist rhetoric creeping into mainstream politics, the rapid erosion of reproductive rights, and climate disasters happening at an accelerating pace. And yet, South Park Syndrome is more pervasive than ever, with people still insisting it's all the same and everything's a joke. This mindset is exactly what allows bad faith actors to thrive. MAGA influencers exploit irony to downplay their extremism, liberals often refuse to engage with nuance, and the average person, bombarded with cynicism, opts out of meaningful political action altogether. But here's the thing, not everything is a joke. Some things do matter, and laughing at everything isn't the same as understanding it. If we want to break free from South Park Syndrome, we don't need to stop watching our favorite shows. We just need to get better at understanding it. Critical thinking is the antidote to South Park Syndrome. That means asking, who is the target of the joke? What is the deeper critique? Am I laughing for the right reasons? Because if your takeaway from South Park is that nothing matters instead of power should be questioned, then you've completely missed the point. And the people who actually hold power, they're counting on that.